Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. Today, I have Nathan Yeung from findyouraudience.online. Check him out there. We talk about his career path, kind of how he got to where he is now. Quite a meandering path, very interesting. And what he's taken from it, basically the importance of focus, not only as it relates to maybe where you're working, but even within a business that you're working on, how you can focus. Quickly switch gears to AI. Can't go an episode without talking a bit about that and how he's using it and how he's thinking about it. The spoiler here is he's just saying, just go for it. Just start trying the tools. You don't know what you don't know. And again, brokers have a huge advantage over banks because they can try things with very little downside. We then talk about that focus and using AI and bringing them together to find a really important niche, and then how that translates to operational and marketing efficiency by building trust. It's a very cool episode. I think you're really going to love it. We'll see you on the other side. Truth maybe is that every time you put a document in an email, that is the most vulnerable place. Hey, Nathan, thanks so much for being here. Maybe to start, love to hear just a little bit about you for myself, but also, of course, the audience. Give us the elevator pitch on exactly who you are.
Awesome. So my name is Nathan Yeung. I've been a B2B marketer for now over 8 years running my current agency, but a bit of a weird background. I went to school for marketing. I was the VP of finance at a very young age. Then I was an operational consultant / management consultant for, 3 or 4 years working with angel investors. And then I kind of meandered my way into running this business. So now it's been 7.5 years. We're now over 25 employees. We work with some of the largest companies in Canada. And my job is I try to make marketing simple. So that's my goal. I try to make marketing easy for companies to consume and execute. We predominantly focus on B2B, but we have done a ton of B2C work as well. Just right now, our portfolio is really just majority B2B businesses.
Nice, love it. Yeah, no, I think the simple thing is so underrated, right? I always think of there's like this Mark Twain quote, which is, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter, right? It's like complexity is sometimes the easy thing, making it simple is the hard one, I think, in a lot of cases. So I love that. So maybe just to start, when you talk about your resume there, quite an interesting path for sure. I'm curious, in that path, was there times in which there was overlap, right? Were you a consultant as you were maybe starting a business, or were you wearing a couple different hats at the same time? Maybe you still are. Talk to me a little bit about how you manage that, I guess. And then were there times where you had to say, okay, I have to maybe take my foot off the gas pedal in this area, and I really need to double down and go all out in this other area? And how did you know when the timing was right to really make that kind of switch? Was that something you ever had to deal with in that meandering path you went through?
Yeah, of course. I think that's a great question. And I think that's one that every entrepreneur or business owner goes through where, often you take the risk to try something new. And, sometimes when you're trying something new, you sometimes have a full-time job on the side and you're trying to balance that. Or you're an entrepreneur and you have multiple ideas and you're trying to see how far you can take each of these to essentially see if you can create multiple revenue streams. If I'll be honest, I think what ended up happening is I kind of just went with the idea or business that seemed to have the most traction. And then the goal there would be to build it to the point where it's reasonably sustainable, where your attention and focus don't need to be 100% in order for it to continue to thrive.
Yep.
And so that was kind of when you make that transition, which sounds really, really obvious and sounds really, really easy and easy for me to say. But like, as we all know, as business owners or people running their own, single person business, is that that's not necessarily the easiest thing that happens.
Yeah.
So, there's tons of factors that come into play when you think about which one you want to stick with. Is one, is it meeting my financial goals? Yep. 2, is it meeting my intellectual goals? 3, is it creating happiness in my life? I don't want to be very spiritual in this sense, but does this really match what my life view looks like for the next 5 to 10 years? And then getting it to the point where it can run itself. And so long as it checks all these boxes, then you pretty much have a business that you probably want to stick with. So that's the easiest answer. And, it's not simple.
No.
Now my business is large enough where I do have smaller businesses. But again, I'm also not pressuring myself to have those businesses perform tomorrow. I'm being much more patient in letting those businesses grow organically. And I think that's something that takes some time to appreciate, is just having this patience.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And, you talk about the different criteria to do it. And, you talked about once being, just the happiness that it creates. I think a lot of people are considering that a lot more, especially if you compare it to, our parents' generation. It was just, get a job and work and do that. But now people are considering these other types of factors. What I always like to say too is that I think if you're really good at something and it's been very successful, kind of, you hit those two dimensions. In my experience, or what I've seen is that third one of kind of the fulfillment becomes a lot easier too, right? It's like I was hearing this story about, I think Scott Galloway. I don't know if you know that guy. He does some of these types of
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay. So he was talking about how, this guy he works with, he's like the best stonemason in his little town. And no one grows up and no one, as a 5-year old said, I'm going to be the happiest I could possibly be by being a stonemason. But this guy was so good, he was so well recognized that by being so good, by having that fulfillment, by being successful, it allowed him to have that happiness side of it too. So I think it's just interesting, that dynamic. I don't know if you experienced that, where it's like, hey, I didn't really draw this up as the thing that's going to make me the happiest, but the level of success that I had and the level of maybe recognition that I've had in my success has led me to kind of find that fulfillment in whatever endeavor you're doing. So, I mean, I don't know if that was the case for you, but I think that factor is important for sure. But I think it's interesting how these different factors, relate to each other, right, and influence each other.
No, absolutely. And, I always say that we try to oversimplify complex things.
Mm,
And so I think when we think about this idea of what is going to make us happy, we think that there's this, one size fits all solution. But the reality is there isn't. And you just have to go through that journey to really be able to come to that conclusion.
yeah, no, absolutely. Everyone's journey is going to be pretty unique. So let's maybe, yeah, switch gears just a little bit there. I think that, I mean, obviously, with this experience that you had quite a few different endeavors. Curious for, I guess, the audience and for myself to say, okay, well, how did you land on this, right? I mean, of all the different things, I mean, it could have been all those different factors. And I guess maybe what would be cool to hear is, what's exciting you today, right? Like what's something today, this week, this month, whatever, you're like, holy crap, that's really, really cool. And that's something that we did. Either it's something for your clients or something you guys are trying out internally, or I don't know what it would be, but what's got you fired up these days?
I think one, how did I get here is just honestly a little bit of two things. One, I ran a consulting business before, so running another consulting business was relatively easy to start, to be honest.
Okay, sure.
And then two, I actually left an ad technology company. And when I left that ad technology company, a large part of my team wanted to come with me.
Okay.
Call me a person who cares or calls me I wanted a place for them to call home again. So I started this company essentially, and some of those employees joined me. And so that was really the start of Find Your Audience. Now, would you say I was the most happy at the beginning? Absolutely not. Did we grow the business to a point of happiness? Absolutely. So that's kind of
Very
what
cool.
happened.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say this was, a methodically detailed plan. I think I
Never
could have
has,
done
right?
better if I were to do that. But in terms of like what's really, really interesting, and I hate to talk about it because I feel like everyone's talking about it, it's like generative AI and what does that mean for my business and what does that mean for our organization? It would be a lie for me not to say that that is the most interesting thing for me to talk about right now,
Yeah.
because when it comes to AI and it comes to what generative AI has done for our business, it's fundamentally changed a lot of our business. Like
Yeah.
it's material and the ability to produce large data sets from generative AI is something that would take a full-time employee to do. And I think that's the really, really interesting part about AI these days is that you're getting a lot more information in front of you and you're able to take that information and you're able to make observations. So this is like actually, I was on a SaaS call recently.
Okay.
This is a brand new tool.
Mhm.
And these guys out of Germany created this cool competitor tool. And I said to them, guys, you have a great tool. You have a fantastic tool. You collect all these great data points, but I don't care.
Mm.
What I care about is observations.
Sure. Yeah.
What does this mean for me? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I think with generative AI, what's really exciting is now you can consume a ton of data and you can get observation
Mm-hmm.
and you can get guided observations. And that I think is the game changer where you wouldn't be able to do that before. You would have to have a data analyst to do that.
Yeah.
You'd have to have someone really comb through that data. And, you were in the mortgage business, Tom, so you know this. Like, how much mortgage data is there in the realm of mortgages, regional data, city data, the length of the mortgages, the rates across different banks, all that data, there's lots of velocity in it, meaning they're coming and they're changing.
Yep.
But the point is that what does that data mean?
Hmm.
And now with generative AI, you can do this in such a way where you can generate those observations with a click of a button, literally.
Yeah.
And that I think is going to be impactful, and it's going to be impactful for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, how I talk about AI, and yeah, it's one of those things where you bring it up and sometimes there's an eye roll, and sometimes I'm the person rolling their eyes because you hear about it so much. Where we're at now, I think, is kind of like where the internet was at in like the 90s. I always bring this up where it's like there's 1,000 things going on, 1,000 people trying 1,000 different things. And like coming out of the 90s, there was like three things that were really exciting. There was like Amazon and I don't know, a couple others. And so that's how I'm thinking about it right now is to say, okay, yeah, you're hearing about it a lot, and maybe you're rolling your eyes because it's those 900 things that are more noise that'll just be maybe not even exist in 5 years. But there is that 100, there's that 10%, 5%, whatever it is, that are real, that are going to be the Amazon in 20 years. You said, oh, it's going to be a big impact for the next 5 years. I think it's going to be like how the internet is now, where it's like you don't even think about what's the impact of the internet. It's just like part of your day to day, right? It's just this thing that you do, right? You don't even take that step back to be like, what is the internet doing for me today? It's just like everything, I guess, right? Like it's just part of it, right? So yeah, it's an exciting trend. Mortgage brokers that I work with, a lot of people are kind of struggling with that right now. It's like, okay, what's noise and what's signal? Where should I be spending my time? And like, hey, this is a cool tool, that's the signal. And then what's just like, okay, this is kind of helping me draft my email better, but I might use it once a month and it's $10,000. Like, I don't want to use that, right? So I'm sure you're flooded, especially in your agency, with 1,000 different tools. What's your kind of methodology if you have one? It might not be super scientific, but how do you say, okay, this is cool, let's figure it out. Hey, don't worry about these tools. I don't think they're a priority. How do you kind of think through that?
So I think there's part and parcel the salesperson's job, whoever's selling you, that's part of their process. If I were to be very honest, we test every tool.
Yeah, right.
The reason we test every tool is because their marketing person or their salesperson might not even be able to articulate the value. And so I've been in a position where rather than having a presumption of what the tool can do, I go in with the fact is, look, they are saying it does XYZ. I know that XYZ is important to me. I'm willing to invest 1 month to try the tool to figure out if it's worth my time. I do this because I think there have been a lot of times where I have not used a tool because likely the marketing team has not been able to translate the features and benefits properly. And then I find out that they do have the things that I need. And so therefore, for a period of time, I'm doing something of which has been incredibly painful when there has been a solution out there.
Yeah,
And so I don't have a perfect science around that because, just frankly speaking, I don't think every company does a great job. And that's the whole reason I have a marketing business, right?
yeah,
And the one thing that I will say for everyone is just recognize that no solution out there typically fulfills 100% of your need.
yeah,
You're always going to only get 60, 70, 80% of that. And recognize that it's not an out of box solution. It's always going to be a part of your workflow.
yes,
And so
yeah.
rather than thinking about an outcome as a package, you got to really think about it as an outcome is a set of steps and that this tool is going to replace some of those steps.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's so important. Yeah, I find, even outside the context of maybe an AI tool of any tech, when we work with the brokers, one of the biggest things that we run into is they say, okay, well, whatever, I want to use this tool for marketing, let's say, and then these are the 10 things that I do for marketing, and it's going to make 8 of them better. And then what inevitably happens is people forget about those 8 and they focus on the 1 or 2 things in marketing that it doesn't do, right? It's like, hey, I want to do 10 things. It's making my life way easier for 8 of them. I'm not even considering that. I'm hung up on the fact that this tool or this process or this thing, whatever I'm trying to implement, doesn't do 1 or 2. And that can be a limiting thing, right? So I think that's really wise to say, okay, each of these things is not going to be a magic pill or whatever you want to call it that's just going to allow you to sit on a beach. It's about being judicious in saying, okay, well, this is how much is involved to implement it, and this is how much savings. What's the ROI, and kind of do it that way, right? So, I think that's good. And I think the other thing too that I'd say, especially for any broker that's listening, is I think, Nathan, what you're saying is it's so important about trying stuff, because I think that's a huge advantage. B2B, especially if you're in like the small, medium business space, like if you're not like a 1,000-person company, you can implement these things so quickly, right? And you can find those answers of what it means to me so quick. And I think that's a huge advantage. Like, if you're comparing as a broker, you're competing with a bank. Maybe you have more experience than I do, Nathan, but we've sold to banks a couple times and it takes like 12 months, and there's steer codes, and then this person leaves, and then a new committee forms. And it's like, to just do the simplest thing, it's so long. Whereas like a broker can pick up a tool and start using it tomorrow. And so those quick iterations of finding out what works and what doesn't, it's such an advantage, I find.
I think trying tools as well is just getting over your own ego,
That too,
right?
right?
Because sometimes you think you know it all. And I think that's even very much true for myself at the same time, because we try so many tools. I am reluctant a lot of times to try some tools, especially data enrichment tools. Like there are so many data enrichment tools. And I always just tell my team, I'm like, look, we don't know. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know if this is going to be better than someone else. So let's just try it. Let's just try it. And if it's great, then it's fantastic. Then, we have something that can add value to our clients and add value to our business. So just try it. If it doesn't unnecessarily tax your time, then it's worth trying.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I'm the same way. And I think it's also, especially for business owners, you were talking about it earlier, kind of in the context of switching to your career, how do you let go? I think a lot of people view their business as almost like their baby, right? I heard this study where people show pictures of their baby, like their kids as babies, and then like a picture of their company's logo. And it's like the same brain response, right? Like literally how you think about your company is how you think about your kids. So using a tool, or hiring someone or whatever, is like sending your kid to kindergarten for their first day or whatever, right? Like there's a lot of that nervousness, and you can call it ego too, that hey, no one can take care of my kid as well as I can. And maybe that's true, but I think it comes back to, okay, what are your goals in your business? Do you want to scale? Do you want to get to that place where you can be scalable business that's bringing on partners, that's doing good things in the marketplace? So yeah, completely agree. So I guess maybe just to kind of hammer it home with this audience, because I know obviously you work with a ton of different industries. I remember in our conversations you do have quite a bit of experience in the mortgage space as well. What would you say to someone, and I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot here, who is a mortgage broker who would be coming to you today without giving away your secret sauce? If they came to you right now, what would be the first place that you'd start? And I'd say maybe especially in this market, I feel that a lot of brokers are turning to marketing. Like before it was, hey, do you know what? Leads are just kind of coming in because the market was so hot in 2021. But now marketing's becoming a huge thing. Like I see some people going on social media more, marketing to their clients, marketing to their partners, like their real estate partners. So what would be, some of that low hanging fruit? What would be one of those first places you would say, hey, you're in this industry, this is what's going on right now, you need to be looking at this or that?
So I think it's different for the maturity of their business, the maturity of their book of business. I think that's obviously,
Yep.
vastly different. So for those that have a new book of business and you're starting your book of business, I know this sounds really stupid, but go directly to your closest friends and family. It's funny how many times someone starts a business or someone starts a new job and no one within their primary circle even knows what they do. So
Yeah,
we
right.
fundamentally do a very poor job of just letting people know how we can service them. And I think also a lot of that comes with pride. Sometimes we don't want to ask or tell
Yeah.
people because we feel like it's asking for help. And I would challenge you to think that that's not asking for help. That's you educating the people around you that you can help service them in a certain way. And one of the things that I'll really emphasize here is trust plays a massive role. And so if you're a mortgage broker and you're speaking to your friends and your family, well, you have to understand you have an underlying level of trust, which will translate into your business and your service. And that's irreplaceable. So you're shooting yourself in the foot by not doing that. So for those that have, no book of business or starting out your book of business, do a really good job in educating your primary circle and do that systematically and do that with some humility. Don't be shameless and just be like, hey, you need a mortgage, do that in a tactful way. But, I'm surprised at how many people don't do that. So I think that's obviously the first thing. I think in terms of like maturing your business and growing your business, you'll have to be mindful of what I call like your three constraints. And your three constraints is one, financial, two, human, which is likely yourself if you're a single broker. And then three, time. How much time can you ride out to see outcomes? If you're cash strapped, then you're going to want short term outcomes. If you're mid to long term, then you're playing a better game. And once you do that, you can kind of recognize the type of tactics you're going to fall into, whether that's buying ads, buying leads from a lead broker, going to conferences, doing in-person networking, going to webinars, going to these things and essentially trying to find new clients, I think is an interesting way. Building partnerships is not going to be a last minute thing. That's going to be something that takes some time. Building partnerships with developers, building partnerships with real estate brokers, building that network again is going to be something that you're going to want to do that's going to pay dividends through time, but is not an immediate thing. So really just being honest with yourself and saying, hey, these are my three constraints, what fits in them, and prioritizing that. So don't spread yourself too thin, because that human capital part is really, really important. You only got yourself and you don't have a lot of room to fail. So make sure that you do a tactic and you do it well. So if you're going to network well. If you're going to do paid ads, spend time doing the paid ads, spend time doing those things well. And the
Yep.
last thing that I'll simply say that I know sounds obvious, and frankly speaking, I feel like every guru, dad, mom, mentor has ever said it, just focus. I've said this in so many multiple podcasts. I go, focus means a lot more to a business than just being one thing. And I always go, focus not only impacts your marketing ability, but focus impacts your operational capabilities. If you're dealing with underwriting mortgages in the 2 to 5 million space and that's all you deal with, the numbers off the top of your head. You know exactly what banks are looking for.
Yes.
You have
Yep.
the ability in a conversation to basically pre-approve people, because you're like, I've done enough 2 to 5 million in the commercial or residential space. I know for a fact they're going to get approved. And to be able to do that in a conversation confidently versus being opportunistic and trying to jump from an $800,000 residential mortgage to $100 million commercial mortgage, you're not going to be able to give the confidence that you need. So being a specialist is not only important in the sense of having your customers trust that you can do something really, really well, it also just lets you be more efficient, because you can also say no to the deals
Yeah.
that won't go through,
That's
right?
so hard though. That's so hard for people, right? Say no. I feel it. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. Yeah.
It is. And I think that's the catch 22. So I always tell people, when you focus, it's slower to do deals, but you're operationally more efficient in the long term. If you
Yep.
don't focus, you get the cash flow today, but you're operationally inefficient, because essentially you're dealing with deals that don't fall within a certain parameter because you're being opportunistic. You're just taking deals as they come. And I think that's fair. So if you're starting a book of business, I'm telling you right now, that's okay. But the goal here,
Yes.
though,
Yep.
is as you grow, you need to continue focusing. You need to get more focused.
Yeah. I mean, starting out, you're trying to figure out what is that focus, right? So take those things and yeah, to your point, let your family know. Some people I think are honestly, maybe it's a little bit embarrassment too. Hey, I'm trying this new thing. I don't know if it's going to be successful. What are people going to think? If I fail in a year, do I want to have let my whole network know that I'm starting this new thing? And I mean, the short answer, I think you would agree, is just to say, well, you're not going to know until you try. So just do it, get over that and get going. But yeah, I mean, we talked about focus at the beginning of the conversation in regards to just career wise, right? Okay, I'm going to try a couple of these different ventures. But I mean, I don't think there's any limit to how much you can focus, right? I mean, now we're having the conversation, even within a business, you want to focus even more. And yeah, I think it helps absolutely operationally. I mean, we can speak to that. We used to be much more generalist. Now we only work with mortgage brokers, and it's just been way better, right? So I can speak to my experience to say, okay, people look at us and say, what, you're only focusing on one industry, you're shooting yourself in the foot. But our business has literally tripled because we focus, because we can, as you're saying, be way more operationally efficient. But I think the other thing too, bringing it back, your whole thing, your marketing can be super specific, right? I mean, imagine if you're putting up Facebook ads, whatever it might be, and you say, hey, you need a mortgage. Okay, so that's one thing. Or if you can come and say, hey, are you a newcomer to Canada looking to purchase a condo in this area, right? Like how much more is that going to resonate? Or hey, are you, looking to open up some commercial space and you need some bridge financing to be able to do that, right? So the more specific you can get, the better your messaging is going to be on the marketing side. And again, that's just going to, I think, make you that much more competitive too, right? You're thinking about a lot of efficiencies, I think, in terms of conversion rate is a good way to think of it. So how many phone calls do I have to actually land a deal? Your conversion rate's going to be that much better if you can speak that much more specifically than the next guy who's going to be competing with you. If you can say, hey, I do exactly what you're looking to get done, then your conversion rates are going to, I think, just go through the roof. So there's no limit, I think, really to how much you can focus in. And I think it's absolutely true, especially the brokers we work with who are very successful. They always have a niche, right? Whether it's investors, whether it's first time home buyers, whatever it might be, it always seems to pay off. Like you said, one of those things that each guru seems to tell you, but maybe there's a reason they're all telling us that, right? It seems to work.
Yeah, it does. And, I think when you talk about your marketing, one of the things that I talk about is trust. And when you are more targeted in marketing, essentially what you're actually demonstrating is more empathy. And
Mm,
empathy is one of
yep.
the 3 points of building trust. And so when you have more language that speaks very closely to someone, you gain more trust. And I always say to a lot of people, marketing's number one job is to generate trust.
Yep.
Like, think about it. It's an obvious observation when you put it so bluntly, but would you trust a magazine ad saying that this so and so thing can cure cancer? All you have to do is get it injected. And it was like a no name brand. You've never heard about it? Like, you just would,
I
right?
wouldn't be injecting. That's not going in my arm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
marketing's job is to build trust, because without trust, we can't even trust the words that we're reading. And so, even if something does solve our pain points, why would we believe in them? So, our number one job in marketing is to build trust. And how we do that is to demonstrate empathy.
Yeah, I love that. And what are your thoughts on this? Because it's something that I've been having a conversation a lot with to that point, just to continue on it. What do you think about personal branding versus more corporate branding, I guess? And what's easier to generate that empathy or that trust is to be Tom the mortgage broker or to be Tom's mortgage company? And is there a time and a place for either of those? I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
I think that goes back to one, actually, the market matters. So if you're dealing with millennials or Gen Xers and more, then you're probably more corporate. If you're dealing with anyone sub Gen X, then typically actually your personal brand will typically do better. On a trust framework, authenticity plays a massive role. So a personal brand is authentic. But then this also comes down to programming of your life and programming of sustainability of your marketing practices. So, one thing I said, there's the 3 constraints that you have to think about, but then I didn't talk about what you should do afterwards. And what you should do afterwards is think about those tactics that come out of those constraints that are sustainable and practical. And what I mean by that is, can you sustain the tactic for a long period of time without taxing your resources too much? And practical, can you do it well?
Mm,
Now, there's an
sure.
argument
Yeah.
of whether or not you can do it well, because if you look at Gary Vee's first videos, it's not like he was doing them very well, but look at where he is. But they were definitely sustainable. And I think when you pair the two, you can get to a point where you are doing it well because you were able to sustain it for such a long period of time, which means you actually are able to learn and change and adapt. And so therefore your product ultimately becomes better. So it really depends if you can, right? And I feel like some people just aren't. Some people are not comfortable doing podcasts. Some people aren't comfortable being on video. It's a learned skill. And I think if you're listening, you have to make that choice to learn that if you're not
Hmm.
comfortable and get out of your comfort zone, or you do other methods. So, I think
Right.
personal branding is a big thing. And I think it's going to get more and more important as we go forward, because I think authenticity is going to become more and more important.
More scarce, yeah. I do agree with that, right? That, we talked a lot about AI in this conversation. I think a natural consequence will be people want the personal touch, right? I think that's actually the stock, if you were to plot it, of the importance of the personal touch. I think it's going up and to the right over the next couple of years because it's going to be a lot of noise, right? A lot of AI generated noise,
Yeah.
and that's important. But, I think you're right. I think it does matter the market, it does matter the niche, and, it all comes together, right? I think that if you are doing something, hey, I want to do a more corporate brand, that's okay, right? It depends kind of what your goals are with your business, but then I think it relates back to then your marketing strategy. Maybe then it's, more high volume, lots of ads, getting in front of a lot of people and just being a very, well-run machine that kind of runs through the process very efficiently, right? I think that that's maybe more on the corporate side. And if, that's your goals for your brokering business, great, right? Whereas, on the other end, if you are trying to be more the personal touch side of things where you're building really, really good relationships with maybe a few, COIs, realtors, financial planners that you have really good relationships with, or, even specific banks, you only work with maybe two or three of them, but you have amazing connections with the underwriters there that you can get the deal done. You want to double down and triple down more on that personal brand. So yeah, I think it does depend on the niche. I don't think one's better than the other. On your end, Nathan, I think to an extent you've really pushed on that personal brand too. What I can say is that it has paid off, and I think it also pays off in the sense of, you don't know what conversations are going to come out of this. Like even me talking to you, I don't know if we we would ever had this conversation if each of us weren't pushing our personal brands. And I think it's been a great conversation. I've learned so much, and so I think there's also that element to it to say, okay, let's take a step back and what do you care about personally for yourself, and do you want to have conversations with really great people, and that's a factor as well. So maybe that's a good place to wrap it up, Nathan. I mean, unless you had anything else specifically you wanted to share with the audience, as I just said, this has been a great convo. Really enjoyed chatting with you and shared some really, really smart stuff. So I really appreciate it and glad we were able to do this.
No, I appreciate it, Tom. It was great.
For everyone listening, we'll leave some information down below for where you can find Nathan. Please follow him if you enjoyed this conversation. I think, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out either. He's been a pretty open book with me, and I'm sure he'll do the same to you. So we'll leave those details in the show notes here. But thanks so much for your time and attention for everyone listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tom.